Hello, I'm Ibrahim Aziz. Today I'll be talking about Monsieur de Sainte-Colombe. Sainte-Colombe was one of the most important viol players who flourished at the end of the 17th century in France. He taught one of the greatest viol players of all time, Marin Marais, and today he is also remembered for his 67 pieces for two bass viols, as well as over 170 unaccompanied pieces for the instrument. He is also credited with having introduced the 7th string to the then 6th string viola da gamba. I'll be talking about some of the characteristics of his works, some performance issues surrounding them, and how I, as a player and performer of the viola da gamba, view these wonderful works. At the end of the film, you'll be able to hear a couple of pieces by Sainte-Colombe, played by me. We don't know much about Sainte-Colombe's life, but it is thought that he was born in around 1640 and that his first name was Jean. He studied the viol with another famous player called Nicolas Ottoman, whose portrait you can see here and who died around 1660. In his maturity, Sainte-Colombe gained a reputation as a famous performer and teacher of the viola da gamba, and he would be performing all around Paris in the wealthy salons of the nobilities, sometimes with his two daughters whom he had taught. His other students include Jean Rousseau, a theorist and viol player who published an important treatise on viol playing, and the most successful of all, Marin Marais, who became one of the best-known viol players in music history. It is said that Marin Marais studied with Sainte-Colombe for a period of about 6 months before the great violist decided that he no longer wanted to teach the young student. But Marais kept appearing in Sainte-Colombe's garden in secret, where the great master had built himself a little cabin in order to practice in complete isolation, and Marais would sneak in order to listen to all the secrets of viol playing that the master did not readily divulge to anyone. The relationship between Sainte-Colombe and Marin Marais was documented by the biographer Titon de Tillet in the 18th century, and slightly fictionalized in the 20th century in a book by Pascal Quignard, Tous les matins du monde, All the Mornings of the World, which was made into a film in 1991. The film portrayed Sainte-Colombe as a complex and eccentric recluse who preferred the company of his farmyard animals to the glamour and glitter of the court of Louis XIV. So something else that Sainte-Colombe was famous for, and which was actually shown in the film, is this: the addition of the 7th string to the viola da gamba. Before Sainte-Colombe, viols generally came with 6 strings. This is a picture from Marin Marais' Harmonie universelle, published in Paris in 1636. This next example comes from a slightly later publication, that of Christopher Simpson's Division viol, which appeared in London in 1659. All of the viols that you can see have 6 strings. So what happened in the 1680s was the invention of wound strings. Bass viola da gamba strings made of plain gut could be very thick and needed to be of a certain length in order for them to resonate properly. This picture shows 2 strings for the same bass note. The left is made of plain, uncovered gut, and the right also of gut, but wound with silver. Note the thickness, texture, and color of each string. The metal winding on the string enabled 2 things. Firstly, the reduction in thickness, and secondly, the reduction in string length. It meant that bass instruments could play very low notes without having to be very big, and so it was possible for an instrument like the bass viol, which is smaller than a violone or cello, to have notes lower than its bottom string, which up to that point was D. Monsieur de Sainte-Colombe is credited by Jean Rousseau in his viol treatise published in 1687 as the man who added the bottom A string. From this point onwards, French viols tended to have 7 strings, with an extra bass string tuned to A, a minor third lower than the cello's bottom C. This 7-string viol made by Champmathieu is a copy of what was probably one of the very first viols to have 7 strings, a viol by Michel Collichon made in Paris in 1683. Sainte-Colombe left us a collection of 67 pieces for 2 violas da gamba. These were never published, and it has been suggested that they may have been designed to be played with a student, although quite a lot of the time the 2 parts would end up being quite equal. It's a nice idea to think that these may well have been some of the pieces that Marin Marais would have been playing with his teacher. This beautiful piece is called Les Couplets, referring to the set of variations written over a repeated bass line of 8 bars. It is typical of Sainte-Colombe's style, combining rather wistful and yearning melodies with some very flashy moments made up of fast scalic passages and bowed out trills. These bowed-out trills are called notes perdues, or lost notes, and they are a feature of Sainte-Colombe's music. They're also slightly irritating to play because often they catch you unawares, and there's quite a lot of them to fit in at any one point. The difficulty is coordinating the right hand and the left hand. Slow motion. Fast. So on a good day, the 2 hands will coordinate. But if you're not warmed up, or if the hands are feeling cold, or you're not feeling great, anything can happen and the 2 things may not be so well synchronized. This is a page from Les Couplets to show you a section containing the lost notes, or notes perdues. They are written as single-stemmed quavers, all tightly packed together, and there's usually far too many of them to count. Often they represent trills, played unslurred, that is, with separate bows, but other times they can form a quick run or a scale, such as the ones you may see at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. As a player, I have to decide whether to interpret the number of notes in the trills literally, or whether to treat them as ornaments and have a bit of leeway with how many I can cope with at any one time. This type of ornamentation can be heard in English and Italian instrumental music of earlier generations, but by the late 17th century has become somewhat archaic. The lost notes, however, do form an important part of Sainte-Colombe's style, and interestingly, you can even hear them in Marin Marais' earlier works, presumably an influence derived from his teacher. The piece you've just heard is a prelude taken from the Tournus manuscript, which is an important source of Monsieur de Sainte-Colombe's music for unaccompanied bass viol. There are 143 pieces in the book by Sainte-Colombe, largely made up of dances such as courantes, sarabands, and jigues. About 30 of the total pieces, a significant proportion, are preludes. Preludes at this period are very free, and you can see that at the beginning of this one there are no bar lines, implying that the music has a sort of tempo rubato quality about it. The improvised feel of a lot of the pieces in this source is very much in line with Sainte-Colombe's reputation as a great improviser on the viola da gamba. Even though Monsieur de Sainte-Colombe was famous for his beautiful melodic style, he wasn't shy about incorporating large chords and rich dissonant harmonies in his music. This next piece, a chaconne from the Tournus manuscript, sums up all the characteristics and virtuosity of his playing, for which he was hugely admired. Monsieur de Sainte-Colombe died around the year 1700. Marin Marais, his most famous student, included a tribute to his teacher, a tombeau pour Monsieur de Sainte-Colombe, in his second book of viol pieces published in 1701. Sainte-Colombe's legacy can be summed up in the words of Jean Rousseau, who dedicated his viol treatise in his honour. We owe Monsieur de Sainte-Colombe this beautiful port de main, the left-hand position, which brought viol playing to perfection, made performance easier and freer, allowed to imitate the greatest qualities of the human voice, the sole model of all instruments. We also owe Monsieur de Sainte-Colombe the seventh string, which he added to the viol. Finally, he was also the one who introduced the use of silver-spun strings in France, and he continually worked to find anything to improve this instrument, if it were possible.